How's it going, YouTube? Come much can say with another video. And today, guys, what to bring to you is Where to Handtrap Master Duel Edition. I'm very excited to bring this to you because I haven't really been able to do one of these in a long time since the format's been so stale in the TCG. But I'm very happy that we have something brand new. There's so many cards in this game that are just like randomly legal, and it's actually insane. So the format is pretty warped and alone just from XC, right? But we're not going to be talking about like the more blanket effects because of they're just kind of more generic and it's not like specific interactions. I have them on the side here as high impact, so these are just the cards that you'd want to like use against certain matchups or where they're most impactful at, so you can kind of determine in your best of one what cards you feel like maining and what cards really impact the most of the meta, right? So I'm going to be basing this off of my tier list and just really doing my own way of defining the meta and really describing the decks that are going to be an issue. So I really do hope that you enjoy this guide. These are guides that I really enjoy doing just because I really want people to succeed and I really want them to not get blindsided by something they may not know. A lot of these interactions are actually from previous formats that we've played in, and a lot of people either just forgot the interaction or they just haven't played in that format. So there's a lot of really key components, especially in this first one, that you just have to know to really do well. So I just want to make a statement before this as well, that Max C is by far the best hand trap. We know this. But if you cut Max C out of the picture, Bell is probably the most insane hand trap in this format. And we'll talk about that why throughout each of these. But to start things off, one of the most insane decks and the most buffed by Master Duel decks that we have is Drytron. This deck is absolutely insane. 3 Ben 10, 3 Ava. That deck is crazy. But what if I told you you could really slow this deck down and make it not be able to play that much? So what you have to do here in this situation is, one, if you just open Imperm or like a Veiler, you stop the Fafnir. The Fafnir right here is going to be one of the issues that you'll face because they'll be able to just use the Xyz material as ritual material, and that's something that you don't want to see happen. But the thing that makes Drytron so easy to beat is if you open Meister or Bell. I've talked about this before, but if you're new here, definitely need to know this interaction. It's very important. So when your opponent uses Medionis Drytron and they go to add it back from their graveyard by targeting a monster they control to make it lose 1,000, if you Bell or Meister it to keep it in the graveyard, they can't ritual summon anymore. And this is really important, and you have to know this, because if they can't ritual, they can't make Ultimatus, and their board is not going to be that good, because especially with Dragoon being banned, they can't even go into Dragoon. So this is huge, and you really have to know this if you want to stop this deck. This is a deck that I've been playing against now for a long time, and this is by far one of the best interactions with it, especially when we had it before it was hit. And I mean, I say hit very lately. It has like 1 Ben 10 now. That was like the bigger hit, but Ava didn't really matter. But even back when it was like be all end all, doing this interaction here with Bellmeister on the Medionis was the biggest thing just to make the deck stop. So without further ado, let's hop into our next deck here. We have Dino. Now, Dino, if you're unaware, this deck really doesn't care about Max C. It cares a lot more about Lancia. If you use Lancia against this deck, it literally passes. It's kind of crazy. If you have a miscellaneous source in your hand and your opponent has Max C, the Max C virtually does nothing because the miscellaneous source will just protect it all throughout the main phase, and by the time you hit the battle phase, like if your opponent has monsters, like they're not going to be able to imperm you from the hand. Nibiru doesn't matter. Like there's literally nothing that they draw into besides maybe a Lancia that actually matters, which is pretty crazy. So this is something where this deck is a huge choice to pick up because it's kind of expensive. I wouldn't say it's that cheap at all, but like it's something that you really want to be able to play because it just doesn't care about Max C. It has so many ways to miscellaneous source, right? It has like 3 Misc, 3 Fossil Dig, 3 Prosperity that you can run. This is a very, very good choice. But the best way to beat it though is if you have Imperm and you have it like set, This is really important. So it could be like Imperm, Chalice, what have you, any kind of like negation effect. You wait for the battle phase, and then you go ahead and you negate the UCT, so it can't run over your whole board, which is really nice. And a lot of people just forget that it's not unaffected like the whole turn. It's only in the main phase. So this is really important here. The other thing is you always want to Meister or Ash the effect of Miscellaneous Source in the graveyard. Still pretty important here. You want to make sure that this does not go off to get the Argiosaur. So there's still really clean ways of beating it, but you are needing to have more than just a Maxi, because the Maxi alone without something like a Lancey in your deck won't really do that much. So make sure that you are prepared for a matchup like this. The next deck here is Eldritch. Now, I'm sure that you are all sick and tired of seeing this deck in the ladder. I know I am. It's a deck that you'll just see over and over and over. Perfectly understandable. There are very clean ways of beating this deck, though. So this is something that I really do all the time, even in the TCG. This is something that I still do a lot, is that you will use your Bell or your Ash to stop the Sanguine. Of course, you don't want them to get to a Golden Lord. The best way to beat Eldritch, though, that I've found, is that if you have Meister, or if you have some kind of negate, you negate the golden lands in the graveyard. So if they go to banish like the Conch or the Aquero, you negate those, because those will set the Sanguines and like the spells to like reborn the Golden Lord. But if you have the Scarlet go off in grave, it doesn't really matter, because that only gets them to a Conch or a Aquero, and those cards literally don't matter if they don't have Golden Lord. So, in my opinion, it's the best way to just beat this deck by trying to Ash or Bell the Sanguine, and then try to stop the Conch or the Aquero in the graveyard, because at that point, they just don't get Golden Lord, and what does the deck do? So it's almost the same as just like banishing all the copies of Golden Lord. So this is something where if you really want to outgrind them and you really want to win, this is the way to go about it. And then, of course, if you have Ash, you just want to be able to negate the pot cards. So, like Extravagance, Prosperity, what have you. So they can't get to more gas. But this is a matchup that is really tough because of the IOs, skill drains, what have you. So make sure that you are on top of your hand traps if you're playing them to be able to stop these specific cards. The next one up here is going to be Zoo Try. Now, this is arguably better than Drytron, in my opinion. It's just way more consistent. This deck is so crazy. Also with Zeus, it's just so nuts. It's so good. So with this one alone, you're definitely going to want to remember that you can Bell that Revolt. Very important here. I think Belling Revolt is nice, but a lot of times they summon out like the Appaloosa, so it's a little less relevant. You got to be really cautious on that, because if they do get to that Appaloosa, you need like a Chalice or an Imperm or something to throw onto it, just to make sure that you're not going to waste your Bell there, right? The other thing too is that you have an option here. You have a very good option. So you can either Imperm the Appaloosa on your turn, so you can just go about your plays. You don't have to worry about a whole lot. When they summon Appaloosa, you can always just go ahead and Imperm it then, like on their turn. Or you can go ahead and stop the normal summon with like their first normal summon of a tribe name if they're trying to go through tribe combo. And then lastly, if you're afraid of Zeus, you just Imperm or Valor the Borbo so it can't attack directly. And then you have to force it into attacking something that it either has to attack over, or hopefully you just have everything that's like bigger than it and it just can't attack. This is a big one that you just have to know, because this thing can attack directly. So you want to be able to negate it as soon as possible, because you don't want them to have the ability to attack and summon that Zeus. So if they have the tribe line and you don't see a Zoo yet, I definitely would just stop the normal summon. So if they go like normal kit banish 2, definitely just stop that right away. But if they have like the Borbo play you see coming, or like the Zoo gets summoned, just wait for the Borbo and stop it, because at that point you're just going to lose to a Zeus. And that's one thing that I definitely will wait until like the battle phase with my Imperm if I need to. Or like when they're attempting to leave the main phase, you'll just like Valor the Borbo. So again, very, very important. You just have to know this. The next deck here is Bird Up. So there's a couple things I want to point out here. One, this is very much so like the TCG. It's a very similar list, just with Maxi. So you're going to want to go ahead and Imperm, Valor, or Ghost Bow that Warbler. It's just the best way to shut them off really fast. They have to waste a normal summon right away. They get one less summon, which is really huge, because they don't get the normal summon with like the kit, which is really important. And also this can lead to them just having a overall very worse board, and this is something that I really do like. It started as something that was kind of like funny to do, and now it's just kind of like the wave, just stopping the Warbler right away. So definitely keep this in the back of your mind when you're playing as Bird Up. The other thing too is that this is a very important interaction. This is like one of the key elements in just beating Bird Up. So if they start with the tribe line and they don't start Warbler, they start like send Fractal, send like Kit, send Nerval, and then add like a Fractal, right? They're going to normal summon, try to banish 2. Now, if the normal summon isn't Nerval, you're going to go ahead and just imperm the Baron Blossom, because the Baron is going to allow them to summon a bird from their hand and get into full combo. If it's a Nerval, don't worry about imperming that. It's just not relevant, because at that point, they're just going to go Nerval, and then they're going to summon the Fairy Jet, and then they're going to try to summon a bird after that. Because if you get rid of like the Nerval, they can just like link it off, and go into their Karis and then keep extending, and then they get to their Fairy Jet anyway. So then they're able to summon that bird, and then they just go full combo. So in my opinion, if it's Nerval, wait for the Baron Blossom. If it's the Fractal or the Kit, then just nail it right away with Imperm, because that's really important, that you're trying to minimize the way to Simorg as much as possible, and also minimizing the ability for them to summon a bird from their hand because of the Baron. Very, very important. And again, just high impact cards being Droll, Maxi, Nibiru. These are pretty common for all the combo decks. So the next thing here is going to be True Draco. So this is something where you'll see this a lot. This is arguably one of the best decks as well. Like Drytron and Zootry and True Draco, they're just like insane decks, right? Like they just do way too much. So one of the ways you really can stop this deck is just holding your Ash for all the pot cards. You want to make sure that you just stop them. You don't want them to get more cards than need be. The other thing is that you can Ash their Diagram or their Heritage, but more importantly, if you want to play something else, you can always go ahead and Ghost Ogre their Heritage whenever they try to use it to draw, use it to summon, or if they try to use their Diagram to go ahead and search, you can go ahead and just return the favor with the Ogre and cut one of their cards off. So that's always really nice as well. There unfortunately isn't a lot of great hand traps to use against this type of deck, but it's still very important to know that these options are out there. But Ash is definitely the GOAT in this matchup. Next up here, we have adamantpader. This one's pretty important. When you're dealing with Block Dragon, you really want to make sure that you have the Ash or the Meister. These cards are very important to make sure that when the Block Dragon goes to the graveyard, they're not able to go ahead and then add 3 different monsters to their hand. This is very scary to see happen, and it's something that you just don't want to see. So this is something too where you just want to make sure that you are holding that Ash a little longer, because if they go normal summon Research or use Effect, like you can Ash that, but like if they have like the Seeker, you just punished. And so there's a lot of different extenders that they can play. And so I would just like really hate to see that happen to anyone where they just go like Ash and then all of a sudden they just like lose, right? Whereas the board might not be as bad if you just go ahead and like Ash or Meister the Black Dragon. So it's really a at the moment type deal, but this is definitely the better target in my opinion. The other thing is that if you have Gamma is going to be pretty insane in this format, because you can go ahead and Gamma the normal summon. I cannot tell you how important this is to just stop the normal summon. If you can get rid of their normal summon monster, they cannot play the game. Unless they open like exactly Signs, and Seeker, like they just can't play the game. So Gamma here is insane. The other thing too is if you open Valor or Imperm, I would definitely just throw this on to the first summon. If it's like the Seeker, the Researcher, the Analyzer, what have you, just make sure that you can shut that down ASAP. But definitely Gamma here is pretty insane. Big fan of that, big fan. The next thing up here is Virtual World. Now, Virtual World, you have a lot of different options. I like this one a lot. So, to start things off, we have Ash versus Lulu. This is something where you don't want to Ash the King Long. It's just a really bad idea, and if they open Lulu, you're going to get punished. If you don't know what King Long is this card right here. This allows them to Rhoda. So if you go ahead and Ash that and they already have Lulu, it's just going to be a bad time. Like you didn't stop anything. So definitely don't get punished. Make them go King Long. Make them get rid of a card out of their hand to use it. Then let them use their Lulu and then let it get Ashed. It just is a lot more value for your card because you know that's what they're searching and you can cut it off right when it tries to activate and you don't have to worry about it later on. The other thing is that when you have the imperm, if your deck really struggles against something like Shen Shen and not VFD, make sure that you're holding that imperm for your turn, and you can go ahead and imperm the Shen Shen on your turn, so that it's not really that big of a problem. You can still access your graveyard. The next thing here is if you have Meister. Meister and Bell are two of my favorite hand traps this format, by the way, if you can't tell. These cards are actually insane. So if you have Meister, this is where you want to stop the King Lung, because this card will allow you to do that. I really do like that as well, or the Reborn effect of Shen Shen, you can stop that as well. But the Meister on the King Lung and Grave is always very impactful, especially when they're really digging for resources. Last but not least, shoutouts to Cody Angeloff, because this one is just such a goated interaction. So if you're going to deal with a VFD, the best card to use against it will be Gamma. Gamma is so broken here because even if they targeted their own VFD with Chuche and pop it, the Gamma will still negate the effect of VFD as always. So just another very, very good interaction here to make sure that you don't lose to the Essential Azathoth. The card's just literally insane. It's banned now in the OCG and it's banned in the TCG, and it's just something that no one wants a part of. So Gamma it as much as you can so you don't get locked out of the entire game. So next up here we have the Pendulum deck. So Pendulum, you're going to see it ran a couple different ways. They're going to have like the Magician variant, the Endominion variant, and what have you. So if you're playing against like the Magician variant, just know that you should Ash the Pen Call. But I think that we're going to be seeing more so of the Servant into Electromite and then kind of choosing what they want to do after that, because you'll still play like one copy at least of the Majesty, but at the same time, like you're not just going to forget Servant's a card when you have things like Might as well, because going Servant into Jackal King is way too good. So definitely make sure that you're on top of this matchup. You're going to go ahead and use Ash or Ogre onto the Servant. Again, very impactful, just making sure this is cleared. The other thing too is making sure that your Veiler or Imperming on the Electromite card gains way too much advantage. You want to make sure that it gets shut off as soon as possible. The deck can get pretty scary if you have no interactions for them, but cards like Droll, your Maxi, your Nibiru really does handle those situations. The only thing that you'll see a problem with is that if you have Nibiru and they have Servant, and you have no answer for the Servant, because then they can just summon out the Jackal King. So make sure that you watch out for that one, and really are kind of seeing where the match is going, because it really depends on what variant they're playing and what they're going to do and what your other hand trap is, right? So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. The next deck that we have here is going to be Phantom Knight. Now, Phantom Knight is really interesting right now because it's just turboing out Rongo Miniad. If you're not familiar with Rongo Miniad, there's only one card in the entire game that outs it, and it's called Xyz Encore. You can't even kaiju it. It's just insane. And so this deck is turboing it out as much as possible. There are ways to get around this, so this is going to be the way that I would say is probably the best. So to start things off, you can Imperm the Gossip Shadow. You can't Veiler it because it can change the effect to something different. I think it's like both players draw a card. And so at that point, the Veiler doesn't really matter. But so essentially what they're doing is they're using Rusty to pop Breaksword, bring back two Phantom Knights, both level 4. And then they'll make Rongo. And then they'll use the effect of Bamboozling to attach to the Rongo. And then it has a bunch of materials, which is really scary. So you want to Imperm the Gossip Shadow so it can't do that. Which again is just very important here. And so the other thing that you can do is you can Bell the Breaksword, which is really nice, so they can't go ahead and Reborn and summon out those two level 4s, making sure that you are in the clear. And again, if they already have the Gossip Shadow, this gets a little more difficult, but there's still a nice interaction to keep in the back of your mind to make sure that you can cut off this rank 4, because you want to make sure that they don't get to that, right? The other thing too is just generically you can Ash or Meister their Ancient Cloak, or their Boots in the Grave, whichever one you feel like is going to be more impactful against you, but usually it's just going to be that Ancient Cloak. The Turbo out for the Scythe doesn't really happen in Master Duel, in this deck especially, because there's no way to like DPE. You'd have to go like Hulk into TG Wonder Magician, and then there's also like no Dragoon either, so this deck doesn't have anything that's like super high impact to summon off of that, so it's a whole like ceiling off the deck now. So it's definitely just Rongo Turbo, and you got to be ready for that. The next thing is Sky Striker. So this deck plays very different now because it has one Kagari. It has an extra engage, but you have to know how to play around this because they're playing Kaiser Coliseum and just sitting on like Shizuku. So this is something that you can really do here to be successful. You can use Bell, Valor, Imperm to really lock the Kagari down. You have to know they only have one Kagari, and that Kagari is really important. So if you can shut down the Kagari, you can shut down the game. Because at that point, if they can't get any recursion going, they're just going to lose. The other thing that's more impactful here and really got to be on top of is that you can Ash the Avarice or the Engage, but more importantly, you can Bell the Avarice or the Herc base, which is going to allow them to recycle their Kagari. These two are what's making the deck go so hard right now because of the fact that it can just keep cycling its Kagari, and then you can just loop all of your engages. So the second that you can really lock the Kagari down, or if you even have things like Crow, you can go ahead and Crow the Kagari. Very, very important to make sure that this card just gets out of the game as soon as possible so they can't keep grinding with you. So the next deck that we have to go into here is going to be Prank Kid. Now, Prank Kid plays a lot like it did back when it was a couple formats ago when I just had the 3 Meow Mew, which is really, really important here too to note that you can still just go ahead and Ash or Meister the Prank Kid effect in the graveyard, and then hope they don't draw their second Call by the Grave now because, you know, they have a lot more protection. But this is still always just the correct thing to do, making sure that you have that Ash for the normal summon. Or on your turn, you can go ahead and Bell their effect, the Bow Wow Bark. I think this is very important because, again, it just unlocks the fact that you don't get locked into non-destruction effects. All the cards get protected on, like all their monsters get protected from things like Burner if you're playing Striker or what have you. So you want to make sure that you stop this because it also just cuts off additional resources that they may need for the Pandemonium. This is very impactful, and I do this a lot. And when you just save it for your turn, you also play around Tactics because Tactics is a very popular card in Prank Kids, and you don't want to play into it. So definitely going ahead and just shutting it off right away. If you Ash or Meister the normal summon, it's fine to play into the Tactics there, but like if you don't have to and you open like Bell, just wait for your turn and Bell the Bow Wow to get rid of a lot of those situations that can be a little unfortunate. Up next here, we have Spiral. Now, Spiral is a deck that a lot of people probably didn't play or didn't get the chance to play in the format. This is a deck that is very insane and it's very cheap. So this is something that if you really go on like DB and learn the combos and then come back to Master Duel and play it, you'll learn this deck is absurd. So cards like Valor and Imperm are pretty much useless because cards like Resort are at 3, where it just says you can't target any of my cards. So Valor and Imperm are pretty much just like dead here. I would not keep those in against this matchup. And of course, you don't really have that big of a choice. But if you're in one of those tournaments where they like do like siding kind of, I think it is, I'm not too sure how the tournaments work yet. Just make sure that you are aware that Imperm and Valor really don't do that much. And especially with 3 Resort and a Terraforming, it's way better than what we had with 1 Resort, on like the Magician's Souls variant of it. But like now we even have Destrudo. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day, and that's like you have Master Plan, and then you can go ahead and use Destrudo and summon it back to the board, like targeting whatever you want. And you can either make like a power tool and then add a big red or a DDR and then overlay with the Master Plan and then make Tomahawk, which is insane. Or you can just go ahead and like make the Tomahawk anyways, and you don't even need to go into things like Power Tool and like combo even further. So this deck gets pretty nuts. So one thing that you should keep in mind though is that you really want to Meister the Master Plan. This thing is essentially Block Dragon with like 1 less add. So essentially what it does is it lets you add a Spiral monster, I believe, and then you're also just allowed to add the Spiral Resort, which is very impactful because that ends up just being another copy of a monster. So that's just really insane off the bat there. The other thing is you want to make sure that you have Bell or Ash for the double Helix because this card is going to allow them to summon 1 from their deck or grave, usually just being that Master Plan. And then when the Master Plan is summoned, they can add a Rescue, which will then allow them to keep extending. So this is something where you really just want to make sure that you can shut those off right away and make sure that they don't get to their monsters that they need. Thankfully, the deck has a really bad problem with bricking, and it's something that is just making the deck a little bit better to play against from time to time. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind as well. Like sometimes the brick is just too much of a problem in that deck, but now they have a lot of resorts, so I don't know. It could be a lot different because they also have 3 drone, and the only like nerf to the deck right now, I believe, is like 1 quick fix, and that's not even a problem. So it's pretty insane. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Where to Handtrap Master Duel Edition. There's a lot of decks that we covered today and just really important interactions that I really do hope improve your gameplay. And if you do need a coaching session and you really want to get better at the game in general, I do offer those over on Metafy. My link is in the description below, so definitely go ahead and check out what kind of sessions I offer. If you're confused on a session or if you want to create your own, definitely PM me on Discord. You can go ahead and talk to me about what you would like to do instead, and we can go ahead and make that happen. Also, if you're not familiar, I'm on social media. I have Twitter, I have my Discord as well if you want to join that. And then also I'm on Twitch all the time, so if you want to go over there and follow my channel, you go ahead and see me playing Master Duel live, or even TCG, of course, all the time with Striker, just, you know, doing my blind second thing. So super, super fun. But I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.